After a very shaky first half, the Kings pull it together and put together one of their best quarters of the season in the third quarter to beat the Suns 114-106. De'Aaron Fox made sure to put them to bed in the fourth quarter, scoring 23 points to extend his lead in fourth quarter points per game. And it was not the prettiest game. The Suns were without Bradley Beal, without Kevin Durant, without Grayson Allen. But they still got Devin Booker. They still got a lot of solid guys around him. And the Kings were just able to shake off a really rough first half where they looked lethargic and just not totally there. And were able to hold the Suns to only 12 points in that third quarter and score 33 themselves to flip a 9-point deficit into a 12-point lead going into that fourth quarter. The Suns came out knocking down their shots, credit to them, and they were knocking down some tough shots, and the Kings were getting pretty open looks, but just not knocking them down. And I think, that it happens, and it's just more jarring when it's at the start of the game. Throughout the course of any game, each team is going to go through stretches of hitting shots and going on runs, but when it's at the very start of the game, it really sucks. It's kind of like when a player like Kevin Huerter starts the season really slow. You can look at his 3-point percentage and be like, wow, he's shooting 15% from three. If that happens in the middle of the season, you're not going to be able to look at his percentage and see that. But the Kings were able to stay in it through offensive rebounding and forcing turnovers, which was really nice. And their bench then kind of got the 3-point shooting going and the offense going. And so, a rough start, but not too bad. But then the Kings it felt like they just weren't awake. There wasn't much resistance, both at the point of attack. Devin Booker was driving right by guys. So was Eric Gordon. But the help defense was, I thought, even worse. Like, I thought that was the really concerning part, is the help defense really was not there. Barnes was offering zero resistance as a help side defender. There was a time where Nurkic in transition was kind of just like bobbling the ball, but he was just kind of allowed by Sabonis to just kind of bobble the ball and get down deep and then score. It's just like, what are we doing? Like, there's no energy. But as what often happens is then the bench comes in and injects life into the team. And Lyles did it. Sasha Vezenkov, who had a great game, did it. And so did Malik Monk and Keon Ellis. Those four guys off the bench were really good and really key to this win. I think there's definitely a discussion to be had around Harrison Barnes' starting spot on this team. He just looks so slow. He's not getting the 50-50 balls. Like, yeah, he had 8 rebounds and 4 offensive rebounds, but when the ball is on the floor, he is not getting it. Like, they're just bouncing to him. He's usually not getting those rebound numbers. He's not athletic enough to block shots when helping, but he's also not quick enough to get to the spot that he needs to get to. But it's not even just about quickness. Like, sometimes, there are plenty of players that are not the quickest, but are good defenders because they just know where to be. And Harrison Barnes has just not been in the right spots. You look at a guy like Sasha Vezenkov, who's coming off the bench, and there was a point in, I think it was the third quarter, where the Kings are in transition and Barnes is on the opposite side of the floor as the ball, and there's no defender. He could just run straight to the rim and get a layup. And he's just kind of jogging. And Sasha just comes sprinting right by him, from behind him, and goes to the rim and gets the layup. And it's those moments, like, I don't know what it is with Barnes right now, but he just looks like a shell of his former self. Mike Brown was talking about, Barnes isn't going to get plays drawn up for him. He needs to be the defensive, kind of the 3-and-D guy, right? If you're not getting plays drawn for you, then you got to be that 3-and-D player. But his threes have been, okay this season, but the defense hasn't been. There have been certain matchups where he's been okay, and they're kind of more the ones where he can use his strength as opposed to his quickness. But he hasn't been producing the same offensively as he was last season. And I think if he keeps playing this poorly, then I think there is a conversation to be had about his starting spot. Because, Kevin Huerter had a bad game and couldn't score 1 point, but I'm not worried about that. But Barnes, it's been like all season long. He's just not quick enough. I think when you look at just what this lineup needs, I mean, you look at last season when the Kings traded for Kessler Edwards and against Phoenix. I think it was in Phoenix that Kessler Edwards had that big breakout game where he was guarding Devin Booker really well, and then he was hitting threes. And I'm just looking around at so many different teams, and the Suns in particular, and even our next opponent in the Nets, where it's like there are just so many guys where I feel like they could be performing better than what Barnes is doing in this starting lineup. Because to be kind of the fifth guy in this starting lineup, you don't need to be the most skilled player. I think what we need is the energy guy and that defensive guy. And it's kind of the opposite of what Barnes brings. Like, I think Barnes can still be a good contributor to this team. I just don't think it's in the starting lineup with the current 4 other guys that we have right now. And I do think someone like Lyles or Vezenkov or even Kessler Edwards or Chris Duarte could contribute more to this team in the starting lineup. And if Barnes could come off the bench, play less minutes, and play against not as tough players, not have to defend a Zion Williamson like he was being asked to defend, I think he could be better. But it's just wild to see how far off, like, athletically he's dropped. His balance just looks horrible. He's only 31. Like, he's not some ancient player. Like, 31, it's getting up there, but he still should be able to produce a little more than he is right now. So it's just definitely something to watch as the season goes on, because I just think when you watch that bench unit come in, they were just so much more energetic. And it to be clear, the start of this game was not solely on Harrison Barnes, but it's just a trend that we've been seeing all season. Other guys were playing poorly. There's no doubt about that. The Kings defense was just weak, letting guys get into the lane too easily. JaVale McGee came in, was not good. Like, he was just out of control and not making smart plays. But at the start of the second quarter, the Kings were letting the Phoenix Suns come around screens too easily and get right into the lane. And then Mike Brown called the timeout, and you could see a concerted effort after the timeout for the bigs, for JaVale and for Vezenkov to really put pressure on the ball and make sure they couldn't just immediately turn the corner off the screen and get downhill. And so I like to see that response out of the timeout. But the transition defense in that second quarter was really bad. I think there were too many easy blow-bys. Monk, Barnes, Keegan, we're all getting blown by. Huerter as well. Barnes blew a wide open layup. But the positives, Sasha was playing really well, cutting really well. Like, he knows where to be on the floor. He's a really smart player. And the Kings could use more of him in transition. He knows, like, where to run to. He's always running the floor. Other guys, just, it seems like they don't know what to do in transition. He definitely does, though. But Domas and Malik stepped up in that second quarter to keep us in it. And Fox was having a really rough first half. He could not hit a shot. He wasn't getting to the free throw line. Like, I feel like there were moments where, like it felt like every decision he was making offensively was just a bad one. Like, he wasn't attacking when he should. And then when he did, he was attacking into like 4 players when there were guys sitting wide open on the perimeter. There were a few nice passes he made, but scoring-wise, he just didn't have it at all. And it just felt like we needed one more guy from the starting lineup to step up alongside Sabonis and then, the bench guys. And Keegan wasn't really finding his shot. He had a couple nice moments of going to the basket, but he was being asked to guard Devin Booker, and it didn't go great. It didn't go horribly, I thought. It wasn't his best defensive performance, wasn't his worst. And I do wonder if being asked to guard the toughest player, wing player or guard on the other team is impacting his shooting, because he just doesn't have the legs. And that's something he wasn't really being asked to do at all last season. And so it's kind of an adjustment that he has to, get conditioned to. But I thought inside the arc he looked good. Like, he just has to find his 3-point shot. You can see the scoring really is there with him. Just needs to find his shot this season, and he's going to be a big scorer. But the end of the second quarter, like the last, I think, 3 minutes, it was horrible. Not grabbing 50-50 balls. Like, the only good part about that first half was the offensive rebounding, but they were trying to trap Devin Booker out at half court, and they would get the trap. They would get him to pick up his dribble. He would be way out, but then it would just be Booker too easily would be able to find an easy pass straight to the middle of the court. 3 other Kings defenders were kind of just sitting too far back. And then once they got it to the middle of the court, it's a 4-on-3. They could either, lob it to whoever was in the dunker spot or hit one of the corner or wing players to be open for 3. There were guys just getting blown by, some poor turnovers and just poor decision making, like the Kings trying to run clock at the end of the quarter. Fox was, even though the Suns were going to have time anyways, and then he just kind of threw a grenade to Monk, who then drove and just passed it straight to a Suns player, and they go down and get a layup. Just a horrible end to the second quarter. But the Kings came out after halftime and were so much better and played one of their best quarters of the season. And that's all you can ask for in a response, because you're over the course of the season, you're going to have some of those halves where you don't play well, but they were able to, keep it to single digits against a team. Like, I was not taking the Suns lightly coming into this game. I knew that they could still be dangerous without Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal, because you got Devin Booker and you got a lot of other solid guys on minimum contracts. You got Yusuf Nurkic, who I know can score a lot, and I was worried about him getting deep into the paint and just hook shotting us to death. You got Eric Gordon, who was knocking down his shots. The Chimezie Metu revenge game. No, it's good to see he still can't shoot from 3. 0 for 4 from 3 for him. But the Kings came out, responded, and took control of the game in the third quarter and did it very quickly. It wasn't super pretty offensively, especially to begin with in the third quarter, but they were kind of getting it done enough. And then it was the defensive side that was really getting it done. I think only allowing 3 field goals in the entire quarter, just so much better, not getting blown right by. So much better on-ball defense. They were forcing Nurkic to take some tough shots, and I think the Kings were doing a good job of kind of picking the guys that they wanted to force to shoot. And they were just much more active defensively, getting deflections. Devin Booker only took 14 shots in this game, and that is an absolute win for the Kings. Even if he made all 14, which he made 10 of them. But only taking 14 shots. He got to the free throw line 9 times, but even that's not crazy. And he went 6 for 9 from the free throw line. It was nice to see another team struggle from the free throw line that isn't the Kings. Nurkic went 1 for 4. They shot 65% as a team, the Suns did. But I thought Sabonis really was dominating in that third quarter. You look at his stat line and you see 15 points. You're like, 11 field goal attempts. That's nothing crazy. 5 assists, 4 turnovers. That's less assists than he normally gets, more turnovers than he normally has. 17 rebounds is great, but the stat line doesn't jump out at you. But I think he really was dominating offensively and just at the center of everything good that was happening offensively for this team. I think it was him and Malik Monk that were really the forces of good for this Kings team in the third quarter and in the first half, in the first half as well, in the first 3 quarters. Keegan also had a solid third quarter. He had that nice move on Nurkic and was getting it going from inside the arc. I think he hit his 1-3 also in that third quarter, if I'm not mistaken. The one thing the Kings didn't do well, at least for a little bit, was their transition offense, something I touched on earlier. Sasha's really good in transition, but other guys don't really make the right decisions in transition. It's like they don't know when to go to the rim or when to flare out for a 3. They crowd spaces and they turned the ball over. There was one play where it was a 5-on-4, Domas wide open under the rim as the Kings are running, and he was wide open for so long, and they just didn't find him. And it was so frustrating because then they turn the ball over, and it's just an easy, layup or dunk for the Suns on the other side. And then right after that, they mess up another transition opportunity. And it's been a theme throughout the whole season so far that they've been pretty poor in transition, but then they got it going a little bit more. And it was Sabonis with the ball, which is where the ball needs to be for good things to happen in transition. And he was distributing well. Then Malik kind of made some good decisions after that as well. The Kings played super well in the entire third quarter, but especially at the end, they closed it really strong. Sasha, offensive rebounding was great. He had 3 offensive rebounds. The Kings won the battle on the offensive boards 15-8, and the total was 50-40 for the Kings. Sabonis was a beast on the boards as well, but Sasha had a really nice rebound at the end of the third, kick out to Keon Ellis, who was knocking down his shots, knocked down a shot. And Malik had some nice plays at the end of the quarter there, the bench really just stepping up. It was nice to see Keon Ellis get his shot going because we know he's going to provide the defense. We know he's going to provide the deflections, and that's great. But he still needs to contribute offensively sometimes. Like when you're the 9th, 10th, 11th guy on a roster, you want to provide that energy and that defense. You don't always need to contribute offensively, but you need to be able to sometimes. And that goes for, Keon Ellis, obviously Davion Mitchell, which he just didn't do it enough to maintain a roster spot, but also wasn't good enough defensively. But it goes for Chris Duarte as well and Kessler Edwards. It feels like Sasha is kind of putting himself in position to get out of that tier of the rotation, but he still is in that tier of the rotation, I think. But he's trying to claw himself up to the, extremely regular rotation minutes as opposed to you're missing a couple shots, you're out. But then Keon at the start of the fourth quarter drew that offensive foul from Devin Booker. That was great. Weird moment with Nurkic standing over him, kind of staring at him. Then Fox, Monk, Lyles getting in between that. Nothing really happened, but double techs on Monk and Nurkic. Very unnecessary technicals. Why? Nothing happened. I don't know. It was just good on the Kings to, get in between Nurkic and their guy on the ground, but nothing happened. Nothing crazy happened. It's just, it's all fine here. Technical is kind of unnecessary, but it was just a weird moment. But the Suns really hurt themselves with the fouls. They had 2 flagrants in the fourth. One was on a Fox 3-point attempt where Nurkic stepped under him, and then the other on Devin Booker pulling Sabonis's shoulder down and then kind of winding up and slapping him across the arms. But Fox, right away, he got an and one, shot his first free throw of the game in that fourth quarter. And so that was kind of the sign that he was, he's getting back into it. Fourth quarter, Fox leads the NBA in fourth quarter scoring at 9.9 points per game going into this game. He had 23 in the fourth in this game, so that'll go way up. But it didn't start great defensively for the Kings in that fourth. They were allowing too many open shots. Like I said, trying to trap Booker again, it didn't go well. They were allowing Yuta Watanabe, the best 3-point shooter on the court, to get wide open. Between the third quarter and the fourth quarter, he was wide open 4 or 5 times. It was just kind of unacceptable because there are a lot of other guys on the court you could leave open. And, the Suns don't have that many great shooters. He is one of them. You cannot leave him, but they did. Luckily, he only went 3 for 8 in this game. Could have been worse with the looks he was getting, but Fox just responded. And him and Book went back and forth a little bit, but it was advantage Fox. Booker was more getting it done inside. Fox was hitting from everywhere. He was knocking down his threes, staring down the Suns bench, just with that swagger that we see from him. That was fun to watch. We definitely haven't seen as much clutch time Fox this season, and it's just the Kings haven't been in as many clutch time games, which good and bad. I feel like, they're kind of keeping it around double digit leads when they have that kind of lead, but they're also getting blown out on the other side when they're losing. So it's like, not as many clutch time games, though. It's less stressful. So that's nice. But when we do need him, he still is that clutch guy. Things got a little scary when Fox and Monk were just dribbling the ball around a lot. Like I can't remember which one of them did it, but one of them turned it over, and there were a lot of other close calls. But Fox was just dribbling in and out of traffic, but he was getting fouled, and so it worked out. But it definitely scared me. There were definitely times where I was like, we should be getting the ball to Sabonis more, and it's interesting because obviously Fox was hitting everything, but there were a lot of times where Fox isn't going to score every time down. Of course, Monk's going to pick up some of that, but I think you need to get the ball in Sabonis's hands a little bit more instead of just using him as a screener. Like, obviously it worked out in this game, but it's been something I've been talking about throughout the whole season, where like when Eric Gordon is on Sabonis in the post, you got to get it to him. And it's on Sabonis as well to get into the post and demand the ball. Because when you got Josh Okogie hounding Fox every possession, like obviously it worked out, but you got to give him a couple of breaks in the fourth quarter from handling the ball every time, because that must be exhausting. The Kings really killed this game though, obviously Fox, but with offensive rebounding. There were some big offensive rebounds down the stretch where the Kings kind of went through the entire shot clock and then would get an offensive rebound, and those were killer down the stretch. And I think it was Keegan who got one offensive rebound, kick out, went to Fox in the corner, sidestep, 14-point game. That was pretty much it. And that's something the Kings have been doing pretty well all season is rebounding. They've also done a good job of limiting turnovers throughout the entire season, near the top or bottom of the league, however you want to look at it in terms of turnovers, the good side of the league when it comes to turnovers per game. There were definitely some bad moments defensively in this one where they just couldn't stop Devin Booker from just taking that one screen and then either leaving someone wide open or Booker would score. But there were also other good moments where they were leaving the right guys open to harass Booker, right? You're leaving Okogie open. That's fine. Nurkic, yeah, you can live with him shooting threes. Bates Diop, Metu, Eubanks. Those are guys that you can leave open. But you don't want to leave Yuta Watanabe open. You don't want to leave Eric Gordon open. But the Kings were definitely good enough defensively in this one against a shorthanded Suns team that doesn't have too much offensive firepower. They were good enough defensively to pull this one out. So moving on to the next game, the Kings play the Brooklyn Nets on Monday. And I'm intrigued by this matchup because you look at the Kings struggling against the Pelicans, losing 3 straight games. Pelicans have a lot of length, and so do the Nets. You got Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Dinwiddie's a longer guy, Royce O'Neal. And now I don't think just length tells the entire story of why the Kings match up poorly against the Pels. I think it also has to do with the other side of the ball of the Kings lacking length and size to disrupt the Pelicans' offensive players. But De'Aaron Fox was definitely struggling at times against a guy like Herb Jones and other guys that were harassing him with their length. And Najee Marshall definitely gave him some problems. And so it'll be interesting. I don't know who the Nets are going to throw at him, if it will be Mikal Bridges or someone else. But the Nets have been playing well as of late. Not against the toughest competition. I think they've won like 6 of their last 7. They're 12-9 on the season. They're not a great team. They're not a bad team. They're a very middle of the pack team. And so it's a game where the Kings at home with rest should, theoretically win, but the Nets are still a solid team. So it'll be a challenge. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how the Kings respond to going up against a team with that type of length. There are a lot of guys on this Nets team that I would love to have on the Kings. And I've talked about that a lot. I've talked about my love for, Dorian Finney-Smith and Royce O'Neal. But anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. I will be back on Monday to recap that game against the Brooklyn Nets. Peace.